All right, so on the wiki we have a schedule for the past lectures, and we had this lecture on Tron and Solana, and we were missing some of the addresses. So I put the addresses here for the exercise. So we're gonna check it today. And then the Menti slides and the lecture videos are on the wiki in the course. Next week we will not have a course on Monday, and this week on Thursday. So we're meeting today, and then we have the next session on Thursday, 13th of March. All right, so let's check some of those exercises in Tron that we missed before. Okay, let me see if this sharing works. So I will start sharing again. Share. Okay, should work. Yeah. All right, so let's try the first address for Tron. tronscan.org, and we, oops, sorry. Here. All right, so if we go to this token, so it says, okay, this address is a token. It's called Tether USD, and it sits here, right? And it's a contract. So if we load it up, we have the name, we have the total assets locked, we have the creator address, and then we can see that the contract had initially 70% of energy ratio allocated to the contract and 30% to users, right? So anybody who was using it initially was only paying 30% of fees because the contract was consuming 70, but the available energy is 0. So now, the users have to cover the costs of interacting with the contract. So what is the contract for? It's a coin. It's a USDT token, which is a stable coin from Tether, and it is available on Tron, right? So Tether released the coin on different chains, and including Ethereum, but it also released the token on Tron. So you can check the contract. You can see that the token is like a token contract, and then you can see the balances, how much this contract holds of various tokens. Oh no, this is the token balances in general. Those are the transactions that has happened for this contract, and it will be kind of transfers, right? Because the contract is a token contract, so it holds coins for some addresses, and it will be basically usually used for people sending money from one address to another address. So all the transactions probably will be just transfers. Initially, if you go all the way back, there will be probably some minting or some kind of creation of the token, but after that, it's just transfers. So that was the first address, and the question was, what was the ratio? And the ratio is kind of given here, and now you see that it's growing because the more people are kind of using it. So, yep. All right, let's see the second one, also on Tron. So we will check it out. And we see that its total assets is $604. And the question was, what was it and where the money came from? So the total bandwidth is 600 still available, but energy was not locked. So for this one, we can see transactions. And there were some transactions 282 days ago. And we can see what has happened out of the account. So it's an account address. It's not a contract. So the account will hold certain certain coins, and from the transactions which happened some time ago, we can check it out. So we can go, let's say, to this one. So this one failed. We can see this one. All right, so it's a little bit tricky to work out what this address is, but if we maybe look for this address, so let's look for this address in Google. All right, so here we have a little bit more detail. We have Rect News. Rect News is it's a very fun site to observe if you're really into cryptocurrency and decentralized finance, because it kind of highlights all the hacks and all the problems that has happened. So here it says, okay, it's a Poloniex. Poloniex was hacked. And if you go to the news item, you will find that address. And this is the address which the attacker used to drain funds from the exchange, right? So if we look at this address, which we did, we will see all the transfers, all the transactions which happened at the day of the hack, and the funds were flowing in. So the attacker was draining the exchange wallets and putting the funds into his own wallet. So that's the second one. So you see the address here for Tron, and also for Ethereum and for Bitcoin. So we can also investigate like where the funds came into from the hack and then where they went out. So we can check what the attacker did with the funds afterwards, right? So we can follow the money. So that was the second exercise. And then on Tron, and then we have 3 simple exercises in Solana. And we kind of did that, I think, already, mostly. So if we go to Solscan Explorer and put the first one, we see some Fartcoin conversion. So it was this question of how much money the attacker, not attacker, the bot made for arbitrage. And here we see that we have $6.02 almost, and then it's like $6.024, right? So it's like 0.4 of the cent the attacker made, right? So sub-cent profit, but the amount swapped was just $6, right? So on a $6 investment, the bot made 0.4 cent of profit. And the fee paid there was a question how much the fee was. So here is the fee, and the fee is like, so here it's the decimal point, so 0.1, almost 0.1 cent, right? So not much costs, and but also not much profit, but the amount being used for the arbitrage was really small. But we're going quite clever. So we're going from Robt Solana into Jupyter Aggregator and then into Meteora, and then we swapping the USDC to Fartcoin on SolFi, and then we're going back to Meteora and back to Robt Solana. So the whole kind of thing kind of is making a little bit of Solana and is doing kind of arbitrage through three intermediary protocols or contracts, right? So it's quite complex, but at the same time, quite straightforward. All right, let's see the third one. Also on Solana. So what is this? Well, it's a staking account. So it's an account which stakes coins, and it's delegated, and then it is managed by Coinbase. So the question was who is owning this account? And the answer is here. It's like Coinbase owns it, and it's equivalent of about $61 million, right? So Coinbase has on this account almost over 61 million worth of Solana, and it's a staking account. So there is a lot of splits and merging and kind of a movement of funds, because Coinbase is an exchange which holds multiple addresses, and they will use multiple addresses to manage what they are doing. So there is a little bit of, from and to Coinbase, and then there are some transfers in and out from the staking account. All right, and then the last one. So you see that the transaction hashes are very long and the addresses are quite constrained. So this is like, even if it doesn't say transaction, we can recognize that the hash is a transaction hash. So then we can go in and see another staking account. And what was the question? It happened 16 days ago. So there is a transaction and it interacts with the system program. So it's just a transfer, and it is a transfer like from this account to here. And the question was where the funds came into that account. So we have to go to this account and look a little bit back. So we would have to see. Yeah, that's not big enough because the previous transfer was 16 days ago. So here we go and we have 3 months ago, and then we have some money coming from an exchange. OKX is an exchange. So the money into that account were flowing from OKX. And then if we continue the search, we can identify another exchange. So we can identify some exchanges, Binance here. So we can see that there is quite a large transfer. So let's go back again to the transfer and let's see like, so this is a transaction, and this transaction is transferring almost 14,000 Solana, which is worth about 2.2 million. And the transfer triggered like a whale event. So every time somebody who we don't know who he is or she is owning an account transfer large amount of money, that means they are either trying to sell it or buy it. Like they are kind of doing something, not buying it, like they already have it. So they might be looking at selling, right? Or doing something or investing into, I don't know. So anytime that kind of a larger transaction happens, it triggers like a whale alarm, right? And then we can check out like how much the whale has, how much money whale has, because here we can see it, the transaction value was 2.2 million, but we can check the account. So this account has almost 70,000 of Solana, which is worth 11 million, right? Um, so it's like one of the Solana whales, which nobody knows who that address belongs to. And every time that account makes a transaction, it's like there are certain triggers which are notifying. Like you can go watch. So there are some. There are some whale watching kind of services, and then you can like this one is on Tron, so you can observe if like some events that happen and observe like who is moving money around. All right, so that was our whale transaction. That was our yeah, this one was the Poloniex hack. This one was the bot trading coins. And this one was what? Let me double check again. What was this address for? Ah, yeah, that was the Coinbase staking account for Solana, right? So we can use blockchain explorers to gain a little bit more insights into what is happening and what different people or different organizations are doing with the funds. All right, so you kind of comfortable using explorers, more or less. All right, so let's go into the presentation. So what we will talk today about is yeah, we will talk about control and governance. All right. So, you know, it's only you. So not a lot of fun with the Mentimeter, but you can still join. And we will talk a little bit about control and governance. So it kind of goes to system theory and control theory. So we will kind of do a very quick rundown through some of the terminology, okay? And why we do control. If you have a small amount of traffic and the roads kind of intersect, and you have small amount of traffic, then you don't really need to control it because it will kind of self-control itself, right? So people will not bounce into one another because the traffic is so low that even if there is like a situation where two people meet, they can sort of solve it themselves. But if the roads are kind of used more frequently and if the vehicles are traveling at higher speeds, then likelihood of collision is very likely, right? So if we imagine kind of intersection like this, and we imagine that this country road has developed and we have like vehicles, like normal cars traveling there, we have a problem, right? So we have to somehow control it such that we prevent collisions to happen, right? So, okay. The first question is how, if we put traffic lights on the intersection, how many states you have to consider when approaching the roundabout, approaching the traffic lights, right? So we have a normal traffic lights. We have green, orange, and red. So when you're approaching it, how many states can we have? So 1 is green, go, right? 2 is red. So what states do you have?
You have green.
Yeah.
And then you have red.
Yeah.
And then you have red and yellow.
Yeah.
Then you have green and yellow.
Yeah.
I don't think you have yellow on, or maybe when it's not French. No?
Yeah. So you have green, red. You have red with yellow. You have green with yellow. Then you have the 5th state is blinking orange or yellow, blinking yellow, right? So this one only blinks. It means, okay, we not working, right? But we also have the 6th state, which is you approaching the traffic lights and everything is off. That's also a state you have to consider, right? So off. And then we're not dealing with exceptional situations. So exceptional situation is you have green, but there is a car coming, okay? So the car has red, but it's going even though it has red, right? So that's kind of an exceptional situation which we don't deal with. But with the normal things, if we consider the states, we already have more than 5, right? Usually the blinking yellow means the traffic lights are not working, but it's the same as having off. So sometimes, they are just off. So yeah, we have like quite a complicated control structure here with multiple states to deal with, right? So if you're programming an autonomous vehicle, you have to sort of predict all those possible states and deal with the states, right? Okay. So we kind of discussed that. So the next question is, if we remove all the exceptional situations, how many we are left with? So if we consider the off kind of exceptional and the drivers not abusing the traffic lights, then we have 4 or 5, right? So blinking yellow is the 5th one, yeah, right? So green, red plus yellow, green plus yellow, and blinking yellow. That's not an exceptional situation because it just says, I mean, you can say this is also kind of exceptional situation. It says the traffic lights are currently not working, right? But they are kind of working. This one says definitely, the traffic lights are not working if they are just off, right? Yeah, so let's say 4 or 5, right? All right, so let's consider a roundabout, okay? So now you kind of are approaching a roundabout and how many different states you have to deal with if you are kind of having a roundabout. And we are sort of thinking about non-exceptional situations. So you're approaching a roundabout, and how many states can your car need? how many states do you need? Yeah. So you're basically approaching a roundabout. You're checking to your left.
Yeah.
Is there a car or not? If there is a car, I have to yield. If there is no car, I can go.
Yeah.
So you have two states, right? And the states are: is there a car on the left or not? Right? If we're having a normal kind of normal Norwegian roundabout.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much just
thinking about before,
yeah, exactly. So before you enter, you basically have two states, and it's with this one was also like you're kind of approaching it, and then you're deciding what to do. Like you have to stop, or you can go, or you have to prepare to stop, or you have to prepare to go, and so on, right? But here you have basically two states, and you're kind of looping through the two states. So if you're approaching and you have a car on your left, you have to slow down, let it go, or stop. But if you have no car on the left, you can go, right? So it's kind of much simpler system where you only have to deal with two states, but you have to recognize whether there is a car on your left or not, right?
You also have to recognize you have time if there is a car on the left that it's far away.
Exactly. So there is more nuance, right? It's a little bit more nuance, and also you have to pay attention to cars in front of you, right? So we are assuming there is nothing in front of you. Same as here, like because if there is a car in front of you, the traffic lights kind of like the car in front of you take precedence, right? So if the car in front of you is stopping, even if you have green, you have to stop, right? So we kind of simplified not to have a car in front of you, but you're right, like when there is a car on your left, you have to kind of judge the speed and things like that, right? All right, so then we go into terminology a little bit. So what is an open system? What are open systems characterized by? It has no feedback loops. It changes energy or information with its environment. It is entirely self-sufficient and unaffected by external forces, or it maintains constant state of entropy. So, perfect. So we kind of, an open system means there is some sort of exchange of information or entropy or heat or energies. There is some form of an exchange between the system and the outside world, right? This one, how we call this one, it is entirely self-sufficient and unaffected by external forces. We call it closed system, right? So a closed system is like completely not affected. About feedback loops, we're gonna talk a little bit more, and then it maintains a constant state of entropy. We say that the system is in a stable condition or homeostasis, right? So human body requires constant maintenance of homeostasis regarding our temperature, right? So if we go into very cold environment, our body has to produce sufficient heat to heat us up. And then if we go to really hot weather, we have to produce sweat and cool us down, right? And we're using kind of external mechanisms like a jacket. Why we do that? Yeah, to limit of the changes from the environment, right? So we are kind of an open system, but if we put clothes on, we limit the influence or delay certain influence from the outside, right? So we get colder or warmer with a little bit of delay, right? All right, so then, whoa, 19 questions. We have a lot of questions. So signal filtering is used in control systems to magnify the input, reduce the system's response time, selectively allow or block certain times of input, increase the system's entropy. So signal filtering is to selectively, yes, fantastic. So we put jacket on to say, okay, I will kind of maintain the layer of air between my body and the jacket such that it's less affected by the outside weather, right? So we can put really warm clothes and go to the minus temperature, and we don't feel it because we kind of sheltered ourselves. So we are selectively blocking certain inputs into the system, right? Same with rain. We can use an umbrella and then don't get wet, right? So we doing it all the time, and the house is an example of that. So the weather outside changes sometimes quite violently, right? So at night we may have -10. During the day we can have +10, right? So we have quite a variety of signals, and then inside the house we try to maintain like a constant temperature, right? So then our body is kind of exposed to this sheltered environment, right? What would happen if we don't have a heater inside the house? Let's say there is no heater, but it's like triple glazing, insulation, and blah, blah, blah. So the house is kind of well insulated, but there is no heater inside. So what would happen? So let's say inside the house, during the day, it's like +10, and inside the house, let's say it's 15 degrees, right? So then during the night, the temperature drops to -10. What happens to the temperature in the house?
I think it depends, but it doesn't move down to like -10. It's probably less than 5.
Yeah, exactly. So it will kind of dip, but it will dip not as much as the outside temperature, and then the outside temperature again goes, let's say, to +20. So then it will raise, but probably not to +20, right? So it will kind of be somewhere in between the two temperatures during the night and the day, right? Probably it will find some sort of equilibrium in the middle and kind of violate, like during the night will drop a little bit below it, and during the day goes above it, but it will kind of fluctuate around the middle temperature between those two, right? So that's the idea of the house. All right. So what is an entropy? Yeah, that one is easy from physics. The measure of disorder, or like how unorganized something is, right? So if something is really well organized, we say it has low entropy. If something is quite disorganized, we say it has high entropy, right? All right, so let's see what's next. If the house gets too cold, the human manually increases the thermostat setting. And this is an example of what? Positive feedback, signal filtering, control mechanism, or amplification. All right. So yeah, exactly. So we basically have like a house, we have a heater, and we have a thermostat. And then the thermostat measures the temperature and then regulates the heater based on the thermostat, right? And when the human adjusts the thermostat, it kind of controls the feedback, right? So it controls the system. So it is an example of control mechanism. So a human is a controller who controls the settings of the feedback loops, right? So what is a positive feedback loop?
Action as a good result to continue doing. No, I don't.
So let's start with this one. So can you give me an example of amplification?
Like increasing what is already there.
Exactly. So amplification is every kind of a setup where we are increasing what's already there, right? So for example, we may have a slide. So let's say we have a slide like this, and then it's like this, right? So this will be amplifying our speed, right? So if I have a slide in here with a certain speed, and then we are amplifying it, right? Another example is we use a microphone and a speaker. So I'm speaking, and the microphone converts my voice into digital signal and then amplifies it, makes it louder, right? So if we have the microphone example, the positive feedback loop is where you take microphone and a speaker and you start speaking, and then what you say goes to the speaker and gets louder, and it gets louder into your microphone, gets even louder, and then you have the positive feedback loop, right? So it gets louder and louder and louder, right? So positive feedback loop kind of magnifies the signal. Amplification is the single step of amplifying it. And then signal filtering, we already talked about, where you cut off some of the signals or kind of shelter the system from certain signals. All right. So then we have another question. In the context of home heating system, which element serves as the feedback? Outside weather, the thermostat, the human, or the heater? Who is the feedback? Exactly. So we have the house, we have the outside weather, we have the human, then we have the heater, and we have some sort of a thermostat which measures the temperature. We have a thermostat, a heater, and the thermostat turns on and off the heater based on the room temperature, right? So this one influences the system from outside, right? So there is a certain level of communication between our closed system and the outside world. That's why we don't have a fully closed system. We have kind of an open system, but we shielding it. We're using good insulation to make it as closed as possible, right? It's not fully closed. It is still open system, but we're making it as close as possible, which means if the temperature of the room drops down, the thermostat will put the heater on, but if the temperature of the room is too high, the thermostat will turn the heater off, right? So the thermostat is the feedback. It's the feedback mechanism which kind of controls the system, and then the controller is the human which controls the feedback loop. It sets the parameters of when the thermostat should turn the heater on and off, right? So this is our controller, and then it controls the feedback loop. Excellent. So what's next? When the thermostat detects that the house has reached the desired temperature and turns the heater off, what concepts is being demonstrated? Homeostasis, emergence, magnification, entropy, or autopoiesis? Fancy words, but we've used the one which is the answer already. Homeostasis, right? So being in stable condition, like maintaining a stable temperature, is an example of homeostasis. Homeostasis is also like we're trying to consume as much food as we need to produce the energy for what we're doing, right? So then we are in a homeostasis. If we are out of homeostasis, usually we are either on the magnification or we are degrading something, right? So we either getting heavier or getting lighter, right? But if we are in homeostasis, we eat as much as we need to kind of produce the work that our body needs. So emergence is when there is something new. Magnification is when the signal is amplified. entropy is the measure of disorder, and then autopoiesis is kind of a related concept to homeostasis, but we have a more complicated cycle. So normally, when we talk about homeostasis, is we kind of, for example, talk about this. So we have some sort of cycle which is in homeostasis, right? So we have the thermostat, the heater, and the room temperature, and then the heater influences the room temperature. The room temperature influences the thermostat, and the thermostat influences what the heater is doing. So we have kind of a cycle, and the cycle tries to be in homeostasis, right? So we have a homeostasis. And then if we have another cycle, if we, for example, have a cycle that also influences the room temperature, so we have something that influences room temperature, and this this thing is influenced by something that is influenced by something that this cycle produces. So let's say there is, apart from the heat in the room, we have something that influences the heat of the room, but this thing influences this thing, influences that, and influences that as well. We have kind of two cycles. So now we have one cycle and second cycle, and they are both influencing each other, right? So then autopoiesis is if all those cycles are in homeostasis. So they are all kind of relate to one another, and they are kind of in balance, right? With heat, it's a little bit abstract. We normally don't talk about it with heat, but we talk about it with ecosystems. So we have certain food chains, and certain organisms produce like food for other organisms, and they are consumed, but they produce food for other ones, and so on. And you have an ecosystem with all those dependencies of who eats what and what is the byproduct of doing that cycle, right? So then if your byproducts of one cycle are kind of products, like sources for products of another cycle, you end up with this kind of dependency, right? So autopoietic cycles are basically a description of how the dependencies work and whether everything is in balance. If things are out of balance, then the autopoiesis kind of collapses, right? All right, it's quite a complicated topic, and it has been, let's say, yeah, it has been developed by some biologists and kind of a chemistry experts. So Maturana and Varela, and they have been used in system theory and architecture and sociology and so on. So we have those kind of dependency cycles, and this is, for example, a cell division. Oh, yeah. So it's kind of like a process of dividing cells, and it's an example of an autopoietic. So auto means self, and poiesis means create. So self-producing, right? So they have to kind of maintain themselves and be in a equilibrium and kind of support. You can have some byproducts, of course. So if you have certain energy being released because of the cycles, then that's fine as well. All right. Yeah, we're doing not too bad. Halfway through. Which term describes a process where small changes lead to large effects, possibly destabilizing the system? Yeah, so positive feedback loops are the correct answer because they can destabilize the system, right? So we have, like with the magnifier, the amplifier, I mean, and the microphone, we can feed the signal through the amplifier, get to the speaker, and then we have a positive feedback loop. And usually it kind of blows up, right? It's like goes into this destabilized regime. Negative feedback loops kind of reduce something. So the more you do it, the less you get. So it's like a negative feedback loop. And then signal suppression kind of limits what you need to deal with. What is black box? That's right. So black box controllers, they basically treat what they are trying to control as a black box. So they don't know why the system reacts the certain way, right? So they are kind of open. Because what we can do, like if we want to maintain the room temperature at a certain level, we have the thermostat, and the thermostat does not really know like how the heat works and how the room works, right? It just detects a certain state and says, okay, with this state, I turn it off, and then it detects another state, and then it turns it on, right? So the control mechanism is super simple, but it's really primitive, right? It's kind of treating the room as a black box, right? But let's imagine that we want to produce a control system for a vehicle where we want the vehicle to maintain a certain speed, right? So what would happen if we do this? If the vehicle is going too slow, we kind of accelerate, and if the vehicle is going too fast, we decelerate. What would happen?
The older cars with less slopes.
No, we just doing like it's like a controlled environment. Let's say it's here, right? We want to have a robot, and we want to have a control mechanism for the robot to move like with constant speed between this wall and the other wall, right? So one mechanism is we kind of do it in the thermostat way. We don't know how the robot really works. We basically say, okay, look, if you're going too slow, we will accelerate. And if you're going too fast, we will decelerate. We will start braking. So how the robot would be moving. So initially the robot is 0 speed, and then we start it. So then what would happen? Exactly. It will kind of be accelerating, then decelerating, accelerating, decelerating. It would be kind of very jerky, moving in a really jerky way, right? So doing a controller with this kind of a black box approach often is a little bit undesirable. We want to have a little bit of an insight, right? So what the insight is that if we are accelerating, but we are close to the speed that we want to have, we want to accelerate less, accelerate less, and basically maintain the speed while we reach it, right? So we usually model certain curve, and then following the curve, the robot will behave. So from the initial speed 0, so what we want is we want certain acceleration kind of a parameter, and then like and here is the velocity, right? So if the velocity is 0, we want the guy to accelerate quite fast. But let's say this is our desired speed, so desired velocity. So then we want it to be kind of like getting to 0 acceleration. The closer our speed is to the desired speed, we want that acceleration to kind of fall off, right? And then when we tell it to stop, again, we want kind of a gently start braking or decelerating. So that's not a good case. Let's do this, right? So we want to kind of start decelerating, and then, or maybe decelerating with the constant deceleration, right? Whatever, we kind of plan some curves. and we model what's gonna happen. So we say, because the more I'm accelerating, the faster I know it will go, right? So it's sort of it's not on and off, it's certain kind of a control. So black box is used, but we often use a more insightful control mechanisms. All right, next question. What typically is the role of feedback? To maintain a black box view of the system, to regulate the system by taking actions based on past outputs, to introduce more uncertainty, to reduce the system complexity. Perfect. So we basically use a feedback mechanism to kind of learn what has worked before and what needs to happen, right? So some feedback loops are hard-coded, but some feedback loops can be adaptable and adapted to circumstances, right? So we sort of taking actions based on what has happened, right? Again, sometimes you cannot wait and you have to take action like proactively, but most of the time, like with the feedback loops, we do that this way. Okay, moving forward. A system where new behaviors emerge that are not predictable from the properties of its components is demonstrating which property? There is a typo, homeostasis. It's an easy one. Almost. It's emergence, right? So we have a certain rules, and then the behavior emerges from simple rules. Like one example of emergence is in block behavior. So we have voids. So we have like each dot has a very simple rules, but when you observe them, you have kind of let's say bird. Yeah, this one is quite nice. So we kind of see an emerging pattern, but each bird is following some simple rules. They basically follow a certain distance from the neighbors, and they maintain the direction of the neighbors, and then the birds on the outside, they kind of lean towards the center, and so on. So there are like simple rules which each bird is following, and it gives a kind of a race to like an emerging behavior, which is like the whole flock. And it is the same with fish. So we can say fish school. Yeah, so like, I don't know if this one will be, no, this one is not showing, but yeah, so this is like a school of fish, and they form this big blob. And then if you kind of flow into it, they will kind of make space, and it's really hard for the predator to kind of attack it because they are not isolated. They sort of form these giant shapes, right? So and we had this with voids, like you can say we can model it with some. Yeah, so
Just look at this flock of birds. It's so majestic, but how do they all fly together in unison like that? It's not magic, it's an algorithm built into nature, and we can easily reproduce it in computers by programming 3 simple rules. Imagine we work for the government's top secret bird program, but currently the birds fly around randomly. So our algorithm needs a rule for separation that tells the bird not to run into its flockmates. Still too random, so now let's write a rule for alignment that tells each bird to steer towards the average heading of the flock. Now they move together in a straight line, but if we add one more rule for cohesion that tells them to steer towards the average center of mass, we get these cool patterns that simulate flocking behavior in nature. Congratulations, you just implemented Boyd's algorithm.
Yeah, so it basically kind of went through the 3 rules.
Randomly. So our
initially
algorithm
they were going
to its flockmates, still too.
So the first one was don't bump into each other, right? So maintain kind of like a certain distance from one another, and then if you're too close, make the distance larger, and so on, right? So they basically, the first rule is to be not
So now let's
bumping
write a
into
rule
one
for
another.
alignment that tells each bird to steer towards the average heading of.
Yeah, and then if you kind of see your neighbors heading a certain direction, you pick the average of that direction, right? So if you have two neighbors and they kind of go there, you kind of go as you do some vector analysis and the heading direction, and you kind of head the same. And then the last one is to steer towards the center of the mass, right?
Tells them to steer towards the average center of mass, we get these cool patterns that simulate flocking behavior in nature. Congratulations, you just implemented.
Yeah, so this is like emergence. Another example of emergence is a game of life. Game of life. That is Conway is a mathematician, and he came up with this simple rules for yeah. So this is kind of like an emerging behavior of the glider gun, right? So it looks like there are kind of some sort of factory, and it produces those gliders which at regular intervals, right? But it's not programmed like this. It's programmed with a very simple rules which each individual cell follows, right? Do you know the game of life? So it kind of, you play it on the grid, and then you have those squares, and then you have kind of an epoch, right? So the epoch is at next generation, some of the cells will die and some of the cells will appear, right? So then you have those 4 rules. So any live cell with fewer than 2 live neighbors dies. So the cell which has less than 2 neighbors will die, right? This cell, how many neighbors this cell has? It has, we kind of see horizontal and vertical, we count. So this cell only has 1 neighbor. This cell only has 1 neighbor, but this cell has 2 neighbors, right? So it says any cell with fewer than 2 will die. So those 2, this one and this one, will become black, but this one will stay live, right? Any live cell with 2 or 3 neighbors lives on to the next generation. So if you have 2 or 3, you live. Any cell with more than 3 dies as well. So and then any dead cell with exactly 3 neighbors. So if you have neighbors on 3 sides, will become alive, right? Let me just double check. Yeah. So you have basically 1, 2, 3, 4 neighbors, right? So then every tick, it kind of happens, right? So this is another example. And then, so we had like a starting position, we had starting cells, and then the universe unfolds like tick after tick, right? And then some of the formations are stable. Like this one has 2 neighbors, this one has 2 neighbors, 2 neighbors, 2 neighbors. So cells with 2 neighbors survive, so nothing happens, right? It's the same here. This one has no neighbors, but this one has 3 neighbors, so it will kind of appear, and then it will kind of flicker. Yeah, similar to this one. We just don't see the flicker. So yeah, exactly. So this is like will go on forever, and this is like flicking every iteration. It's kind of changing. So then you have those emergent behaviors, and people are studying it. Like, what are the emerging behaviors? And there is a certain like size of the research that has been kind of yeah. So those are kind of stable forms. Those are oscillating. Those are like spaceship glider. So we saw the glider before. Pulsars. So they kind of go over a certain period of sequences, but they go back to the same form. So this one is like a period of 15. So after 15 iterations, it comes back to the same state, right? This one has period 3, period 2, and so on. So there is like the whole body of research, which is sort of like investigating how they work and what.
Are there 3D versions of this?
I think they are, yeah. But even the 2D is so complicated that like we don't know everything yet. Yeah, and we often use it as an example of emergence, like for example this, right? So we can see this one is like an oscillator, but it's a crawling oscillator. And then those are oscillators as well because they go over a certain sequence and they produce something that kind of ends up crawling away. So this is kind of like a glider gun. Yeah. Yeah, we sometimes use it as a programming exercise to program this kind of step by step because it has simple rules. Yeah. All right, next, 13. Which of the following describes the deterministic view of control? Humans have full autonomy over their actions. All events, including human actions, are predetermined by prior causes. Control is a social construct, and technology shapes human behavior. So you have a couple of concepts. Which one is the deterministic view of control? Yes. So if you are determinist, you think everything is determined by the stuff that went before it, right? Including your choices. So your choices are not completely random, but they are also not completely your choices. They are dictated by what has happened before, right? There is an interesting philosophical debate whether humans have free will or whether we don't.
Yeah.
And there is an interesting experiment where a human is seated in front of the screen. So a human, okay, let's do the normal human, is seated in front of the screen. And on the screen, you have a square and a triangle. And then here you have a square and the triangle buttons. And you have a choice button. Okay. So then a human is wired with EEG headset, and it's being scanned. The brain is being scanned. And you should relax and think about nothing, and then make a choice. So you're making a choice, square or rectangle, and then when you made the choice, you're pressing the choice button, okay? So you said, I made the choice, and then you press the choice, okay? So first, when you are aware that you've made a choice, you press the choice button and then you make a choice, okay? And then what happens is the researchers can predict with, depending on the human, between half to 1 second before you press the choice button, what your choice is. So the EEG in your head makes the choice, and then this choice is communicated to your consciousness, and you are aware of that choice, but the choice was made before you were conscious about it, right? And this is one of the examples which sort of emphasizes that we may not have a free will the way we think we have it, because the choice is made in the subconscious level, and then it's kind of feeded back to our conscious mind, and we are becoming aware of it, but it has happened kind of earlier than we think it has happened, right? All right, so that's the determinism. All right, let's move on. We will ask about the other concepts in a moment. So in cybernetics, the control is exerted through top-down governance structures, predetermined laws of human nature, feedback loops, and communication within the system, personal autonomy, and free will. Of course, this one. So we are simplifying complex systems and complex social systems into kind of a system theory and control theory. And we talking about communication and feedback loops, and we sort of maintaining control over the system through that, right? But if we move a little bit more towards humans, so according to one philosopher, modern forms of control in society operate primarily through what? How are we being controlled? What is controlling us? Yeah, very nice. So we behave because of internalized norms. So we have been learned or have been taught, and we learned what the expected behaviors are and what gives us what we sort of want, and also what does not cause kind of conflict. And we sort of internalized it, and we kind of following it. These legal systems and social contracts are a mechanism for actually teaching us, right, what to do and so on, and also correcting us if we violate. But it's not the reason why people do what they do, right? So we don't follow the law because there is law. We follow the law because we sort of internalize that that's what we want, actually, right? So the causality is kind of like, it's not an easy causality between legal systems and what we do. And also the coercion and physical force, again, yes, in exceptional circumstances, people do what they have to do because they are coerced, but majority of control is here, right? All right. So technological determinism, what is this? So if you're not technological determinist, then you think the first thing. Then you think that the technology is neutral. But if you are technology determinist, then you think that it is the technology which drives the social change and kind of makes human kind of do what they do, right? So it constrains our choices, and it also makes influence on the decisions that we make and shapes the next technology kind of wave, right? So it kind of drives the process. So the technology drives the process. Are you leaning more towards technology determinism or more towards the technology is neutral?
I think I lean more towards definitely people determinism. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the same. So I think there is a certain truth that the technology does dictate some of the choices and shapes us. Like for example, with the rise of mobile devices, we limited our physical contact. Like we socialize and we sort of have, let's say, micro relationships, like mediated through devices, right? If it was not technology, we would not have it. And because we have the technology, we have it, and we sort of give in. Like we don't have to, but it kind of happens, right? So there is this like, it's not fully deterministic, of course, because you still have choice and you can still do things outside of the technology, but it's harder. And most people sort of fall into the mechanisms which the technology sort of dictates. Why this one is not true? Why technological systems are not shaped by government regulations?
Regulate it very effectively because the technology comes before the regulations.
Exactly. They are very reactive, right? So the technology innovations and technologies happens first, and then we have regulations, right? So we have the privacy laws and GDPR, not because we thought about it, but because the technologies like Facebook and Google were sort of encroaching on the privacy too much. So then we're regulating it, but they're always reactive, right? They always come after technological innovations, right? Is technology shaped by cultural norms and by culture?
Yes, I think so.
To some extent, yes, right?
But also the other way.
Exactly. But I think the other way is bigger and stronger, right? So we often have new technological innovations which are changing the way the norms and society works. And there is some innovation because of the norms, but yeah, the opposite is bigger and stronger, definitely.
The technology innovations work that because maybe we found some other way to communicate rather than through our phones.
Yeah.
Then we wouldn't have the same maybe technological drives to social in another way. So
yeah, definitely. All right. 3 more questions. More philosophical. Utilitarianism. Utilitarianism justifies control over human activities if it Yep. So if people are utilitarians, they say, yeah, we should put people in jail, or we should, coerce them to do certain things because we want to maximize, right? So it's a kind of a difficult topic as well, because in the, like, what can go wrong?
someone have the control that doesn't want to do what makes people happy.
Exactly. So the kind of utility function, which is the happiness, like who defines that? How is it defined, right? So in some countries, it is defined in a certain way, and it's not necessarily the way people feel that it should be defined, right? So then certain mechanisms are put in place, certain control mechanisms are put in place. And then it's like, okay, maybe it is not what majority of people really want or perceive as happiness, right? So it's kind of complicated. So what is the, so one example is this kind of like you make a choice which maximizes the let's say happiness or survival of people, right? And the opposing one is you have more absolutist view of morality, right? So the utilitarian one kind of calculates, okay, what would be the maximum kind of metric, and the absolutist one has a certain rules which work always the same. You don't calculate anything, right? So an example is this experiment where you are controlling like railway tracks, and there is like a train coming, and the train, if the train goes straight, it will kill like family of 5. But if you change the lever, it will kind of a swivel and it will kill just 1 person, right? So then what do you do, right? And then the utilitarian answer is very simple, like you always pull the lever because it will kill just that 1 person, right? So there is a more complicated version of that like mental exercise where you have a gun, and then either the 5 people die or you have to kill the person, or like whatever that is, but you actually physically have to kill that person, right? So then like if the exercises with just changing the tracks, most people say, yeah, of course I would change the tracks and it would go there, right? But if you have to physically like do something and kill 1 person, then some people say, okay, now I'm kind of a little bit uneasy, right? But in both cases, you're killing that 1 person, right, by your action, right? So the absolutist view is that like there are certain rules, and let's say the rule is don't kill, which means I cannot kill anybody, right? And I will kind of maintain it, right?
But if you switch the track, you would kill that 1 person. If you don't switch the track, it wasn't your fault that the 5 people died.
Exactly. So that's also begs the question whether inaction is also an action, right? So if you didn't do anything, is it considered that you killed the 5 people, or is it not considered that you killed the 5 people, right? So it kind of gets a little bit complicated, and like the abstract thinking about it is like maybe good exercise for like considering different options and moral kind of models, but in the real world, it's kind of complicated. And we usually follow both. Like we have certain rules that we don't want to break. Like for example, we don't want to kill anybody. And this is like absolutist view, right? Even if killing somebody would save many more lives, we usually are uneasy about killing somebody, right? And then we lean towards absolutist. And then utilitarian, yeah, like we kind of make both choices. All right. So then we have 2 more. In liberal philosophy, control over individuals is justified under which principle, according to Stuart Mill? Yeah, okay, that one is easy. Yes, there is one obvious answer. So it is similar to the it's similar to the previous one, where we maximize the overall happiness, but here is the opposite, right? We reducing the harm, right? So that is a little bit easier to define, right? So it's also easier to measure. Doing harm and doing happiness are kind of 2 opposing metrics, but the harm is kind of more tangible and easier to measure and more universal. whereas the happiness is a little bit more ambiguous. All right, and then the final question. Panopticon metaphor. Nope. So it is kind of related to legal authority, but it's more than that. So there is an old prison in, I don't remember, I think in Trondheim actually, or maybe in Oslo, in one of the cities. We had a workshop and we took our visitors to that prison. And the prison is like this. You have the guards. So the guards' quarters are kind of in the middle with windows. And then the cells are all around, right? So here the prisoners are kind of in the cells and they are observed by the guards. So the prisoners, they see the window, but they cannot see if they are observed or not. So it's like a small hole, which is kind of deep, and they cannot tell if there is a person inside or not, but they are facing the guards, right? Constantly. So they are constantly being observed. And this is kind of a metaphor for panopticon, where you are under constant surveillance. Somebody is constantly watching you, right? It kind of goes to some religious yeah, this one. So this is like a good eye which watches against the evil eye, right? So you are being watched constantly, and you want to defend being watched by the wrong things, right? In some religions, you have this concept of all watching and all seeing God, who always sees what you do, right? And it's sort of this panopticon metaphor, which is quite. It takes the surveillance or the legal and physical kind of authority to the extreme, right? So you're always watched, and you always kind of measured, and you always subjected to consequences of your actions, right? So this is, again, in some authoritarian regimes, it is taken to the extreme. And in the liberal philosophy and mentality, we sort of say, no, like, that's wrong. Like, it's wrong if you don't have any autonomy or if you don't have any personal freedom. And this is like going too far with the control, right? This no harm, like in liberal philosophy, we accept. We say, yes, we have to punish people, we have to lock them up, and we have to prevent them doing certain things to minimize harm to others. But we are not okay with this panopticon metaphor, with the total control. All right, so yeah, you are the leader. Woohoo! So what it has to do with the lectures? What it has to do with the rest of the course? Well, the control is how do we regulate society, and how we regulate services, and how we regulate this emerging phenomena which has happened because of the decentralized finance or blockchain technology, right? What should it be? Should it be constantly monitored and kind of having kind of a oversight? By whom? By governments? Should it be self-regulating and minimizing harm to others? Should it be just let alone, be autonomous? We don't know. Like it's a difficult subject. and we are sort of in the big experiment, and we also don't even know how we should regulate societies, right? So we thought democratic societies are the way to go, but we have a little bit of a crisis lately, and there is a lot of people voting for authoritarian regimes, right? And if you are libertarian, you say, why people would give up their autonomy and give up their personal freedoms and subject themselves to some authoritarian regime, right? And then again, the other side has some reasons like why they kind of prefer that, right? So it's a constant experiment, and we are sort of balancing how we should regulate and how we should organize ourselves and how should we work. And the cool thing about the decentralized finance and decentralized organizations is that you can try out different models. You can try out more authoritarian models with benevolent dictators, and you can try out more democratic ones with a lot of voting and kind of on-chain processes, right? And it's the same with open source. A lot of open source projects actually have a form of mixture. Usually you have some sort of a strong leader who is the leader of the project. And often that leader is a benevolent dictator and dictates the final say of the project, right? But then again, if that dictator is pushing too much, there is a fork and the community splits, and part of the community don't want that. They want something else, right? So it's kind of a self-regulating. So in open source, and in blockchain systems, we have quite an interesting experiments kind of happening. And we have to kind of keep in mind that a lot of those experiments has happened historically with real systems, and we kind of repeating some of the mistakes or repeating some of the benefits. And as I said, with open source, we don't do always go with voting. We often have a democratic discussion, and then the leader of the project says, okay, we're gonna do this. I'm taking all the points of view into consideration, but I think we should go like this, right? And if that goes with majority, often that is fine. If it goes against majority, sometimes there is fork. Sometimes the community kind of splits, right? Can we do that in real societies? No, we cannot. If half of the Norwegian society doesn't want a certain leader, they cannot fork. They cannot say, okay, we're gonna go our own way and we will have a different leader, right? There has to be a consensus. So certain things are sort of organized in such a way that forks are not possible, right? And yeah, that's kind of an interesting question. If you are in a particular project and then the project forks, you have a choice. And the same with the services in decentralized finance. If you like certain way the projects work or certain tokens work, you can go and kind of be with them. But if you don't, you can take all your resources and put it in a different project, in a different sort of country, right? So it is kind of a fluid, like in the technology and with the decentralized finance, it's very fluid. With real societies, we're learning some of the mechanisms, and maybe it will influence the way governance happens, right? So we have to keep those ideas in mind effectively. All right, it's 1:45. I will stop.